Hello, thank you for watching my video. My name is Astrid Krasniqi. Today we will be talking about chapter 3.3, Create and Configure Virtual Networks, part of the Configure Hyper-V. On this chapter we'll talk about configuring virtual networks, then types of virtual networks, switch against virtual switch, or physical switch against virtual switch, MAC addresses, emulated devices against synthetic devices, demonstration create a new virtual switch, and demonstration configuring MAC addresses. Configuring virtual network, Hyper-V allows you to configure complex virtual network environments. A virtual network works like a physical network switch, except that the switch is implemented in the software. Ports are added or removed as they are needed when virtual machines are connected to or disconnected from virtual network. Configuring virtual networks, Hyper-V provides several different options for network communication between virtual switches. You can configure virtual machines to communicate only with a limited number of other virtual machines that are hosted on the same server. For example, here we have a Hyper-V server, and in that server we have installed domain controller 1 with IP address 192.168.1.1, DNS with 192.168.1.5, and then two client machines, .8 in the end and .9. Now to make these machines to communicate with each other, we will add a private switch. That's it. These machines that will be able to communicate with each other on this server and nobody else outside. You can configure a virtual machine that communicate with external network in a manner similar to traditionally deployed physical host. Again, we have a Hyper-V server and the machine is the same as we had before, but this time we added a switch, and this switch is connected to our physical Ethernet, and then they can go to other external networks. Type of virtual machine, we have an external virtual machine or virtual networks, internal virtual networks, then a private virtual networks. External virtual networks is used this type when you want to provide virtual machines with access to the physical network to communicate with externally located servers and clients. Hyper-V does not support wireless network. Then we have internal virtual network. Use this type when you want to allow communication between virtual machines on the same virtualization server and between virtual machines and the management operating system. This type of virtual network is commonly used to build a test environment in which you need to connect to the virtual machines from the management operating system. And then we have a private virtual network. Use this type when you want to allow communication only between virtual machines on the same virtualization server. A private virtual network is isolated from all external network traffic on the virtualization server. Very useful when you need to create isolated network environment, such as isolated test domain. So we have types of virtual networks. We have external virtual networks, internal virtual networks, private virtual networks. Switch against virtual switch. Physical switch can have 12, 24, 48 ports. If you require more ports, you have to uplink two switches or more switches together. Virtual switches on Hyper-V, you have unlimited port numbers. In Hyper-V, you can create a virtual switch for each of the physical network adapter installed in the host computer. So each adapter that you have, a network card, you can create a switch for it. When you create a virtual switch, a virtual switch appears in the network connection in a parent partition as a network adapter. The switch is bound to the operating system TCP/IP client. MAC addresses is short for Media Access Control Addresses, is a hardware address that uniquely identifies each node of the network. A MAC address is also known as a physical address, hardware address, or burned-in address. This is a layer 2 address that doesn't get changed. This is like a burned-in address or physical address. That's it, you can't change it. MAC addresses has 48 bits. The first 24 bits of the MAC address indicate the specific vendor for that device, or organizational unique identifier, or UI. So MAC addresses are represented in hex format. So this is one example of the MAC address, 2C-41-38 -87-C1-94. Now the first 24 bits of the MAC address 24 bits is OUI, Organizational Unique Identifier. So whatever organization has made this MAC address or network card, we can identify them with the first 24 bits. For example, HP has its own one. Whatever the manufacturers of network cards, they have purchased the 21st 24 bits. Last 24 bits, it's up to them to use them. Then Hyper-V has a pool of 256 addresses to assign to virtual machine as you create them. The difference between emulated devices and synthetic devices. Emulated devices, synthetic devices. Emulated devices are the hardware that is presented inside of the virtual machine. These devices are handled through emulation that runs in the management operating system or parent partition. The advantage of emulated devices is that most operating systems have inbox drivers for them and are able to install and boot using them. The disadvantage of emulated devices is that because they were not designed for a virtual machine, they do not perform as well. Synthetic devices. Synthetic devices are the new high-performance devices that are available with Hyper-V. Instead of emulating an existing hardware device, a new hardware device is exposed that has been designed for optimal performance in the virtual environment. In this demonstration, I will show you how to create a virtual switch and then how to configure MAC addresses for that virtual switch. So I'm going to go again to my Hyper-V manager. So on the Hyper-V manager, I can say here on the side, on the right, virtual switch manager. So you saw me when I installed the Hyper-V manager, we created this LAN switch. I'm going to create a new switch, so just select new virtual network switch and then create the virtual switch. And then give it a name. So maybe this one is going to be a private switch. So I'll say private switch, and I will choose private here. Apply. So now we have two switches. One is local area network and one is a private switch. In this private switch, we can change the MAC addresses here, the MAC address range. So for example, I can change the range here to something that makes sense to me. So maybe 0001 all the way to 000000 FF. Okay, now that is more than it's allowed. FF in the end, that's enough. 256 MAC addresses available only. So okay. Right, so next time you create the virtual machine and you connect it to that switch, the private switch is going to use one of these MAC addresses that we created. Okay, on this lesson, thank you for staying. We talked about we demonstrated create a new virtual switch and configure MAC addresses. On this lesson, we talked about configuring virtual networks, different types of virtual networks, physical switch against virtual switch, MAC addresses, emulated devices against synthetic devices. And then I'll show you a demonstration how to create a new virtual switch, configuring a MAC addresses. I think I just want to show you a bit more. I'm thinking about these switches so we can understand. Let's go here. Let me delete this stuff. This is what we were doing earlier. So delete this. And okay, so I'm going to do it on Paint here. I'm going to show you these switches. So first of all, I'm going to get some machines. Here I'll get 2 servers maybe, and then I'll get some client machines. A few client machines. Okay, now the switch that we have created, for example, we created one of the switches was LAN switch. So you have to, I'm just going to draw a line here, and on this line it's my LAN switch. So LAN switch. Now whoever I connect to that LAN switch, it will be able to communicate with each other and externally if we enable it. So for example, if I connect this domain controller to this LAN switch and I connect this client machine to the LAN switch, these two, they will be on the same network. We just give an IP addresses and they will be able to communicate. It's a virtual switch. And then say I'll create another switch underneath. That was a private switch. So say this private switch, I'm going to put it with red. and it's going to be private. Private switch. Now I'm going to connect all the machines to my private switch. You see that now is a different communication on a different switch. So these guys, they will not be able to communicate, the red and the black, they will not be able to communicate with each other because they are in the different switches. They will have a different IP address and a different MAC address that we have created. So for this, for example, the private switch, we said the MAC addresses are from 00 to FF on the hex. Okay, now if I go to my Hyper-V and I got this machine here, for example, and let's imagine this is this machine here, this red one. So it's going to connect to the private switch. So if I want to change the switch, I go to the settings of the virtual machine, and then on that virtual machine, on the network adapter here, see it's already on the black line, LAN switch, so I can move it to the private switch and apply. So now it's just gone from the black line to the red line, from there to there. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with me, and hopefully I'll see you in the future videos. Bye bye.